Most of the time, what is going to happen is that you may have problems with an application that is not running, it's giving errors, or the clients are not able to actually connect with the server or with that specific application. And sometimes the server is not actually performing well. For example, if you have a DHCP server, services installed in a server and clients are not able to obtain IP addresses. So what are you going to do first? The very first thing that you will do is in a client operating system, you will be first checking to see the IP address. So you will check the IP address and you will do IP config, and most of the times the IP address that you will see is 169 dot something something, and that is the APIPA address, and that is the address when the machine is not able to get IP address from the DHCP server, and a machine is not able to actually connect with the DHCP server. So how are you going to troubleshoot that? The very first thing that you will do is you will check to see if the cables are connected correctly and if your network connection is working fine, and you will check to see if the machine itself is okay, the client machine where you want to obtain IP address. So after IP config, what you can do is you can ping localhost. After pinging localhost, you can see that it is replying. It means that there is no issue with my network adapter here, so it is working fine. After checking the layer 1, which is physical layer, what I can do is I can move forward after confirming that the client machine is fine. The next thing that I can do is I can go and ask my network engineers and ask them to check the switches, because most of the times switches have wrong VLAN information, or the switches ports are not working, or it's not connecting on the network. So what the network engineer can do is they can go and check the port, check its configuration, make sure that the configuration is right, and then at the end, if everything is okay and there's no problem on the network, what you can do is you can go to your server team, or if you are working on a server, the very first thing that you can do is you can go to your DHCP server and then you can check to see if the services are running. So what are we gonna do in here is we're gonna make sure that the DHCP is working fine. So in here we have DHCP client. So DHCP client is only on a client operating system, but if you have a DHCP server, you will see another service called DHCP server. Why are we not seeing it here? It's because we don't have DHCP services installed on this machine. So our main idea in here is how do we start, stop services? How do we troubleshoot that? So the very first thing that you can do is you can double click on that services and you have general tab. On the general tab you can see that you have service name, you have display name. So service name is DHCP, and you can always use this service name in order to start and stop even from the command line if you want to. And each application that we have, they are actually stored in your operating system drive, and this is where it is stored. So you can see that it is stored in here. So if you want to execute this service, you can directly execute it from here if you want to. Another thing is a startup type. A startup type is where we have automatic, we have manual, we have disabled, and delayed start. Most of the services that is required to run all the time needs to be set up as automatic. Most of the times I have seen many applications not working. When you're working in a production environment, most of the service, if the application is not working, what you can do is when you come into your, for example, when you come to see the services for that application, you will find out that the startup type is manual. That is why that application is not working. So a tip here for you that most applications will not work when the startup type is set to manual. When you set to manual, what does it mean? It means that this service needs to be manual, where when I start it should start, when I stop it should stop. But when it's automatic, what's going to happen is that when you restart your server operating system, it will automatically start it if it's needed, if it's one of the application that is going to be started when you start your operating system. If you disable it, what's going to happen is it's going to disable the service. When you disable a service, it means that the application will no longer work. So clients will not be able to obtain IP addresses. If you disable this client machine will not be able to get any IP address. So if you disable that and then say apply, you can see that it is now changed to disabled. You can always stop service. By clicking stop, it will stop the service, and then by clicking start, it will start the service. So you can always do that from here. And another one that we have in here is logons. Most of the services that you may have in your operating system will require privilege to run, because if you have an operating system or where you have an application from like third party, and what are you doing in here is that you're running that through, for example, SQL Server, or you're running it through service accounts. Most of the times, in order to run an application, you will need to create a separate account and then link that account with that application, and then that account will have the rights or permissions to run that service for that application. So you will have to type the username and password for that service account in here, and that is how you will be able to start and stop. So logon tab is used when you have a username that has rights or privilege to run a service, privilege to run an application. So most of the times, when are you gonna use it? When you have third-party applications. But in here you can see that I have local service. Why do I have that? It's because I am using DHCP client, which is one of the system services. That's why you are seeing that in here. So we will not touch it. If we touch it and use, for example, guest account in here, or use any other account where they may not have the rights to start the service, they will not be able to start that service. So we are going to mess up with the services. So do not change anything on the system. When are you going to change it? When you're using third-party application, and the company for that third-party application will let you know if it's needed. Another thing for the troubleshooting is recovery tab. Recovery tab is really important. So what happens most of the time is that some services, they fail to run. So what do you want to do in here? For example, you have an application and that application is always failing to start the service when you turn on the operating system. So you can define the first failure action, second failure action, and third failure action, or like subsequent failures. So you can define all that settings in here, so you don't have to come and turn it on or start it manually when you're sleeping and it's 2 o'clock at night. So always check it as restart, and then subsequent failure is set to no. You can simply click to run a program. Most of the time what happens is that in most organizations they say if on a first failure happens, restart, second, restart. If on the third one or the subsequent failure it happens again, run a program where you can have like a batch file associated. You can use that batch file to force start that service. So that is part of the troubleshooting that they do in most of the companies, where you can use this option in here. And then what we can do is enable action for stops with errors. If you want to basically enable this and then configure other options for like restart computer options and so on. And then dependencies. This is one of the other thing that you have to know. Most of the services, they rely on other services. So if a component that we have in here and DHCP client relies on it is stopped, the DHCP service will not work. So basically DHCP client or most of the services that you have, they rely on other services. If those services are stopped, it will not work. So how do we troubleshoot here? Let's just say that DHCP client is actually running and then still you don't have any like IP address assignment working. What you can do in here is you can come to dependencies and say that the service depends on the following service components. Okay, it's network store interface services, and then you have the other service in here. So what you can do now is you can go to network store interface services and then make sure that this service is also running and all the dependencies are running in order to make this services work. So if the dependencies are running and this DHCP client is running, what you can do is you can now be sure that there is no issue with the services. Another tip or another troubleshooting tip that I can give you here is most of the times the service is hanged. The service is hanged. It just needs a refresh. And how do you do that? You simply restart it. And you can see these are all the dependencies that we got. So basically restart it and it will make that work for us. Let me make it automatic and then start it again. Okay, it's saying Windows could not stop on the local machine, access is denied. So let's troubleshoot that in here. I will not pause it because I want to make sure that everyone knows how to troubleshoot such errors. One of the things that I can try is that I can simply come here and close services, and then I can go to services this time by right clicking and then run as administrator. So this time if I run as administrator, I will check to see if I can do that or not. So access denied again. Let me restart the server and see if it's going to make any changes here, because the services settings looks good, and I'm using administrator account and still I'm not able to restart the service. I'm gonna log in here and you can see that I am using administrator account here. And after logging in, we can go back to services and right click, run as administrator. I go to DHCP and double click here. The service was stopped, so I click on start. After restarting, it was stopped. And I'm able to start it now. Let's click on restart and I'm able to restart it. So the restart of the server basically fixed that problem, and you can see that I have the same settings. I don't have any changes done in here. So that is how you can do that. So basically most of the times when you have access and everything is fine and you check to see that the settings are correct, and a server restart basically fix that issue. So that is one of the things that you can do most of the times.